What's up, Sumolings? It's Jay here, and today we have a special interview with Ayman, the CEO of AppSumo. We're going to talk to Ayman all about AppSumo's new work from home policy, how it came to be, and discuss some tips and insights if you're looking to implement a hybrid work from home model at your business. So without further ado, let's go catch up with Ayman. What's up, Ayman?
What's up, Jay?
We're doing a work from home series on YouTube. Was wondering if you had a second to talk to Sumolings about AppSumo's work from home policy. I know you have a bunch of insights and would love to hear more about it.
Yeah, I mean, given that you scheduled this on my calendar for today, yeah, let's do it.
Awesome, cool, appreciate it.
Get going.
March 13th, I remember to this day, we were all in the office, we're watching the news, figuring out what's happening. And I remember crafting this message to be like, through an abundance of cautions, we're gonna close the office through April 1st. Everyone work from home. Take what you need today to go and work from home and be comfortable. And at the time, so naive, thinking, hey, 2 weeks, we're gonna work from home, everything's gonna be fine, we'll be back. That was April last year. It's May 27th right now. And we are still working from home, still in a hybrid remote environment. So what prompted the decision, number one, we didn't have a choice, right? I think that was, it was very clear. Our hand was forced. We had to quickly pivot and figure out how do we, as a company that was majorly working from the office, transition to being a hybrid first or really a remote first company while a global pandemic was going on, like so many other companies. And I think like all of us were sort of figuring out on the fly. But what we've seen over the last year is, while there is a lot of negatives, and we can touch on that, so many negatives, that we have actually come up with a lot of solutions to fix, the amount of benefits have far outweighed the negatives. In fact, we actually just sent out a survey to the team. Over 96% of our team has said that they have loved this new hybrid remote environment. So even with everything that was going on, even with all of the potential negatives, we have somehow figured out a way to make hybrid remote work. We're in the office right now. I think there's maybe 2 people here. Clearly it's working, and our results have never been better as a company. There's a lot of things that just have been huge benefits for the company, and we can sort of touch on that throughout this interview. The reason that we didn't go hybrid and remote before we went before the pandemic was mainly because we had this mentality that the best ideas occur when you have all of leadership in a room, everybody whiteboarding, everybody talking, really like free flowing and getting all of those creative ideas out. And there really is nothing more energetic and magical about all being in a room together ideating. And so we were like, you can't do that type of ideation over Zoom. Like, there's a ton of virtual whiteboard experiences, but nothing's the same as just being there live and actually ideating together. And so we hesitated from going hybrid or remote previously because we're like, that magic can't be recreated. And you know what? We were 100% right. We tried to do it. We tried to do that ideation, to replicate that process via Zoom, via these third-party tools to be able to go through whiteboarding. And what we ended up realizing is that people are talking over each other. Zoom, you're constantly interrupting each other. Zoom fatigue is real. Often ideation takes multiple hours over the course of several days. And so you end up, just nobody wants to be in this meeting. And what we end up realizing is that you can't take what works in person and try to force feed it onto a screen and hope that it's going to work on the screen. So for the longest time, we were struggling with this. We have since adopted a model where we're now more asynchronous. What that means is ideation mostly focuses on how do we get our best thoughts on paper? How do we get it written down? How do we ask clarifying questions? How do we provide commentary? How do we make sure that we're not talking past each other, but really getting the clarity back down onto the paper? And more importantly, not forcing someone to come up with a solution on the fly in the room. And so what ends up happening is ideation occurs over the course of 24 to 48 hours where we're all riffing on a doc that we're leaving commentary on, that we're responding to. And more importantly, we have a single individual that's making a decision. And what we've ended up realizing is we actually have such deeper insights, such deeper clarity of thought. We're able to, instead of force feeding it into a Zoom call, we're actually getting much better insights and much better ideation through this process than we actually even did when we were all in a room whiteboarding all together. And so what ends up happening is you have to transition from working or trying to force working in person to being virtual, but rather rethinking the way you do work, period. And what we've realized is by doing it in this more asynchronous way, that the quality of output has far exceeded anything that could have been accomplished being in a room together. When you give people time to really ponder a question, like there's a problem that we want to solve, if you give them time to take a step back and go, let me research what the best in practice is. Let me sleep on it. Let me think about it. Let me do my own data and analysis. You end up getting such better insight than, hey, let's just all figure this out right now in this meeting and make a decision before we leave. Number one, you're forcing 10 people in a room that are all in different energy states. They're all in different mental models. Someone's thinking about, the Slack message that they just received. They're all in just different mental capacities, and trying to force a quality decision in that 1 hour time block is completely different than being able to, hey, everyone please respond to this over the next 24 hours because I'll be making a decision by end of day tomorrow. And so having people riff into that document, ask the questions, bring up questions that maybe you didn't even think about, continue to have that back and forth conversation, all via this asynchronous process, forcing a vote, and then having that single decision maker making the best decision possible, given all of this input, really has resulted in way higher quality. And actually, what's even funnier is it's actually resulted in a lot faster speed. You'd think it would actually slow us down. Like, why are we taking 24 hours to make a decision versus 1 hour? And here's why. Because what ends up happening is you are forcing everyone to get their opinion written down on paper. Whereas in a meeting, nobody knows, right? You could take meeting notes, but it's like, oh, I didn't really say it that way. But if you force someone to vote on a doc, it draws a line in the sand. This is what I believe and this is what I stand for. And then more importantly, it documents the decision. And what we're noticing is that when we used to make decisions in meetings, people would be like, well, let's have the meeting after the meeting, right? Do you really agree with that decision? We should probably revisit this decision. Let's bring it up in next week's leads meeting. And what ends up happening is that 1 hour decision actually ends up being several weeks of decision and deliberating and back and forth versus going, no, we're drawing a line in the sand. So-and-so is making this decision. We're doing it in the next 24 hours and we're able to move on, and everyone commits and moves on. We never really believed in this commit and agree, or disagree and commit mentality. But honestly, since implementing that process, it's been hugely beneficial, and we're making decisions with much more speed. But more importantly, there is less re-debating of those decisions after those decisions have been made. And we should share the template. It basically talks about what decision are we making? What is the context of this decision? What are the implications that we should recognize? When is this decision going to be made? What's the deadline for all of the input? And then most importantly, who is the decision maker? And it's really important for managers because you can't pull rank. If you give someone the authority to make a decision, you can't come back later and go, well, I don't really agree with that decision, because that ends up disempowering them. Then they're like, well, who's really making this decision here? And so having all of those elements written out prior to the deliberating, prior to all of the commentary, is super critical, because then you can come back to it at the end when the decision's finally made and be like, look, this is all the documentation. It's awesome. It's nailed out. And then you can roll it out to the entire company. And more importantly, you can see how the decision was made. You can see the commentary. It's not isolated to whoever was in that room. It no longer creates this ivory tower mentality. The entire company gets access to this decision making. And so you can actually see what's happening live, and have a log of how the decisions are being made over time. And that's something that we've rolled out recently, and it's been hugely impactful for us as a company as we're living in this new hybrid world. Whereas before, we kept trying to do these Zoom meetings and deliberating as a group, and recognizing that like half the room doesn't really need to be there. And so now they're distracted, and you're kind of wasting everybody's time, and you're contributing to the Zoom fatigue that's already too real. For Zoom fatigue, I feel like I have better than most stamina in regards to being able to like attend several hours of meetings in a day, particularly Zoom meetings. But the problem is particularly when you're in large meetings. That's where I feel like Zoom fatigue, like when there's more than 3, 4, 5 people, what is happening is your eyes are darting constantly across. Instead of looking at person one-on-one, having a natural conversation, you're darting at this person, you're looking at this person, you're looking at the screen, and your eyes are just constantly going back and forth. That's number one. It's causing all of this fatigue in your eyesight. Number two, because Zoom, the way webcams are set up, they're mostly focused on your face. You have an inability to see the body language. I mean, you could see myself right now. I'm talking with my hands. I'm gesturing. I'm looking around the room. well, I forgot what the stat is, but I believe, something over 2/3 of your actual communication style is not verbal, but it's actually from your body language, and includes actual body language, not just your facial expressions. And so the inability to see that strains your brain even more to understand, like, what does this person think about this, and what does this person like? Instead of actually getting it written out on paper, it's important. You end up struggling with understanding how this person feels and how everyone in the room feels. And then the last is no one feels they can get a word in edgewise. Everyone's talking over each other. Some people are like, do I even need to bring something up? I don't want to be the one person that's dissenting. Words can feel emotionally charged. There's a completely different way for something to be written in a nice, calm way to make sure that I am accurately bringing up my concerns without putting energy and emotion behind it. And all of those things, the emotion, the needing for my eyes to dart all over the place, the lack of context in the body language, the fact that everyone's talking over each other, multiply that over 5 hours. I mean, is there any surprise that nobody's getting any work done? At the end of the day, it's like after, I've been in 5 hours of meetings, the last thing that I want to do is actually open up my to-do list and actually get some work done. And so for us, figuring out Zoom fatigue is really recognizing, like, do I really need to, constantly question, do I really need to be in this meeting? Is it really critical? Can this instead just be a one-on-one? Can we have we do like breakout rooms? Oftentimes in our leads meetings, we will have a list of questions, and there's a couple of those questions that require maybe a 15 or 30-minute conversation after the meeting. And what we used to do is we used to just have those conversations right in the meeting. And half the team would be super engaged and super energized. The other half of the team is like, why am I here? This is a waste of my time. Be looking at their watch, like, can we speed this up? Like, let's make a decision. We have since transitioned to be like, that's great, let's table that. And so we'll finish the meeting 15 minutes early and save the last 15 minutes for those folks to reconvene, have the conversation by themselves, make a decision, and then share it with the rest of the group. And that's been a huge transformation just in terms of eliminating some of that Zoom fatigue. I think step one is stop trying to make the office virtual, right? Like after 5 hours of Zoom meetings, the last person someone wants to do is jump on a virtual happy hour, right? As a manager, try your hardest not to make the office virtual. Instead, try to rethink the way that you do work. Where now we do AMAs all via Slack. And for 30 minutes, everyone in the engineering department can roll out a whole bunch of questions and ask anything they want to get to know someone. You end up learning so much about someone without needing to jump on a Zoom call. Number two, start to leverage third-party tools to get pulse checks on teams. When you're all in the office, it's very easy to know, hey, so-and-so's having a good day, so-and-so's having a bad day. It's a lot harder when you're not, chatting with someone for multiple days, if not weeks at a time. And so we started rolling out Polly surveys. They're super simple, lightweight surveys that operate directly in Slack. And we'll send out regular pulse checks. How was your week? And we'll keep it super simple. Sending out pulse checks to the team in terms of, hey, like, what's your top priority for this week? Anything that I can help you with? Is there anything that's blocking you? So being able to use tools like Polly that make it super lightweight to get a pulse check, because when you're remote, you miss out on some of that context that you may see when you're in person. And I think the last one is don't ping someone and be like, hey, can we chat later today? Right? Like that immediately sends anxiety and chills down someone's spine when they're receiving that from their manager. Like, over communicate. Hey, can we chat 5 o'clock later today to discuss the proposal you sent over yesterday? Oh, I'm not fired. Like we can chat about the proposal. Like that's the only thing that's going to be discussed. On that note, advice for individual workers. I mean, there has been, I think, a epidemic of Hanlon's razor on all of these hybrid remote companies. Hanlon's razor states, never attribute to malice that which can be attributed to miscommunication. And I think a lot of times people will be like, why wasn't I looped into this conversation? Why did this person make this decision without looping me in? Why wasn't I invited to this meeting? And 9 times out of 10, it's miscommunication. But when you are no longer developing those deeper relationships in person, grabbing lunch, going to coffee, it becomes very easy to just assume malice or assume the worst of intentions. And so I would recommend for workers, reach out directly. Be like, hey, what did you mean by that comment? Right? I know it's a weird feeling to jump on a Zoom call after the Zoom call and be like, hey, what did you mean by this? I just want some clarification on this. But the opposite is resentment. If you don't do that reach out, if you don't do clarification, if you assume malice or you assume ill intent, what ends up happening is the resentment builds over time. And we all often talk about rose-colored glasses. I think there's the opposite. There's dirt covered glasses where all these like deaths by 1,000 cuts, eventually, even the way the person sips their coffee pisses you off, right? You're like, look at this asshole, like sipping the coffee that like with such smug arrogance. And it's like this entire time is just pure miscommunication. So I love people on the team that immediately like, hey, what did you mean by this? Can we get clarification here? And always assume just pure miscommunication over ill intent. Actually treat it like work. Like, get up in the morning, get dressed, go to your office, like somewhere in I think like sometimes people will just grab their laptop and they'll sit on their couch that they do for everything. And the problem with that is the workday never ends. Their laptop is always there. 6 o'clock rolls around, they turn on Netflix, but their laptop is still there. And so like actually treat it like work, even when you're working from home, even if it's like the kitchen, this particular seat at the kitchen table where I put, my whole desk setup, that's my office. And so like get dressed, actually, make your coffee, sit down for work, and then making sure that you actually have a closing ritual at the end of the day, right? And so like, what is your closing ritual, right? Like for me, it's like making sure at the end of the day that I'm hitting inbox 0. For me, that's clearing out email, clearing out Slack, and double checking my calendar for the next day. Number 2, making sure that I know what my number 1 thing for the following day is. And the last thing is like actually having like, sometimes the commute home actually is like, it's the separation of work from home life, right? It was the commute. And you need to recreate that ritual at home, whether that's ringing a gong, taking a bath, going to the gym. Like you need to have that clear separation so that way work doesn't constantly bleed into home life. And what ends up happening is you end up burning yourself out because you're literally, you feel like work never ends. And as you know, like more importantly than going to the gym is the rest period. And same with work. Just as important as the actual work is the time away from work for you to recharge, recalibrate, ruminate on some of the ideas, and come back the next day with a fresh mind. And if you don't have that closing ritual, work never ends, and the quality of your decisions and the quality of your output will degrade over time to the point where you reach burnout and you're like, something has to change.
And there you have it, Sumolings. That's how AppSumo is approaching work from home straight from the boss man himself. Make sure to thumbs up this video if you got something out of it, and drop a comment below if you want more videos with Ayman on all things leadership, business, and entrepreneurship. As always, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and we'll see you over on the next one. Peace.